Hi, everyone.
Yes, well,
I'm Jennifer Howze, editorial director of Noon. We're going to just, chit chat and hang out here for a minute or two while people are filing into the room. We've got a great webinar today with Heather Darwall-Smith, who is a sleep expert, and I'll just give her a proper introduction in a minute. And of course, Noon founder Eleanor Mills. And I'll be popping up here and there to ask questions as somebody who's very curious about sleep. I'm wanting more of it all the time. Um, so really the question that we are asking and hopefully answering in this this online event webinar is how are you sleeping and how can you sleep better? Um, so help is at hand here with our expert, Heather Darwall-Smith. So she's a sleep expert and she's already written one book about sleep, and now she has a new book about sleep.
good point.
Um, Heather's new book is called How to Be Awake So You Can Sleep Through the Night. And it follows her, there you go, you can see it there. And it follows her debut book called The Science of Sleep. And this book, yep, there you go. You've got both versions here, the original Science of Sleep, and then the new one, How to Be Awake. And it explores the paradox of modern sleep struggles. And so instead of just focusing on sleep symptoms, Heather, who is a psychotherapist, shares her approach to help us unpick some of the causes of poor sleep, learning to address them so we can sleep better, feel more rested, and feel better in and of ourselves. So she demystifies all that, data. It feels like every day there's some other study about sleep and how, like, scolding us that we're not getting enough of it and what we should be doing. And combines it with natural self-help techniques, so things you can actually do at home. So anyway, that is a very brief hello for Heather. Welcome, Heather, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, we've got Lynn again. Hello, everyone. Really lovely to see so many of you. For those of you who haven't done a Noon event before, I'm Eleanor Mills, the founder of Noon, and we're all about trying to help women in midlife through what we call the midlife uh, midlife collision, midlife clusterfuck, midlife chrysalis. You can kind of take your pick depending on how you're feeling today. For me today, it's felt a bit more like a midlife clusterfuck. It's been a bit one of those days. But anyway, it's very nice to be here with all of you. And Nina's here to bring joy primarily, to support you through the pinch points of midlife, and to help you kind of answer that big question, what next? Those are some things we really kind of try and help. And so what we're doing today with Heather is part of our kind of expert support, because we know that one of the things which is particularly difficult in midlife, or which can really hit us, is not sleeping well anymore. And certainly for me, the kind of worst bits of kind of perimenopause, menopause have been, I've always slept like a log. It's like waking up in the middle of the night so hot. I feel like I feel like you could fry an egg on my head sometimes. It's so I get so hot. And then feeling so then you can't get back to sleep again. So, I think for whatever reason in midlife, even those of us who have slept quite well can start suffering from sleep problems. And I know that my friends who've always had sleep problems, things get even worse. So I think that sleep is a really good topic. So much so, I really liked Heather's book. I thought it was really clear, and she really knows what she's talking about. So I gave her a quote for it. So actually, if you get the book, it says, "Rewrites everything we know about sleep. A must read." Eleanor Mills from Noon. So we're glad to help and support Heather. And so Heather, tell us a bit about you as a kind of sleep therapist, and kind of what your day job is, and also why, because I remember when we were on retreat in Wales, you told me about why you decided this book was so crucial. So tell us a bit about that to kick us off with, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you for having me. I'm really chuffed to be here and talking about my favorite subject, which is how to be awake, not necessarily sleep. Um, so as Jen and Eleanor said, I am a psychotherapist and I chose to specialize in sleep. Um, and it came out of a whole bunch of reasons as to why. And one of my big inquiries, really, my master's for my psychotherapy training is a mindfulness-based training. And I was really curious as to what was I doing as a therapist if I'm working with people who are sleep deprived? Because we know that neurologically we are so altered by the lack of sleep. And a whole bunch of things sort of happened all at once that took me down this path, which has created a real speciality because there aren't classically psychotherapists who do what I do. Working with sleep issues is quite a siloed practice. A lot of insomnia is dealt with by psychologists with CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which I have trained in. But there are over 80 different sleep disorders. And one of the things that's quite clear is people think that they have insomnia, but there could be other things going on, especially, I mean, at our stage in life where menopause is kicking our ass and really taking a wrecking ball to sleep. So there were lots of reasons as to why I ended up going down this path. Um, and I never thought I would be an author. My previous career, I was an art director, so drew pictures for a living, which is why, ironically, the first book, this one, is literally full of pictures. It's all pictures with few words.
Oh no, this one's all words.
This one's all
There's no
this is all
there's no pictures. There's a few kind of
yeah,
graphs.
yeah.
Like, but
Yeah,
yeah,
that
there's
so yeah,
no
whilst
pictures.
I thought the first one would be a headbanger, 30,000 words and a lot of pictures, 100,000 words for it nearly killed me. But I
Yeah, and
want
what Heather's not saying, but what she told me about was that you can't you're slightly dyslexic, aren't you? You're not a
I'm
kind of
very
natural.
dyslexic. Yeah, I'm very dyslexic. Late in life diagnosed ADHD, which has been an amusing experience, not. But I have a very strange process to writing. I dictate everything, and I'm constantly backwards and forwards with what I've dictated because I find it very difficult to read stuff back. So it's quite the mission to do this. But the reason I wanted to write it was because having worked for 3 years in a sleep clinic and I have my own practice, what's really clear to me as more and more people are aware of sleep and the issues around sleep, my God, there's so much negativity and
Yes.
there's so much fear. I mean,
And that really
yeah,
comes across in your book, actually, that the kind of the
yeah.
intersection between what we kind of read about sleep and castigating ourselves for not getting enough sleep and all. I mean, I have to say you have a few words to say about journalists on the subject of sleep and how we love. I mean, the reason why journalists are endlessly writing about sleep and kind of hyping it up with headlines like, you'll never sleep again or the answer to your
Mm,
sleepless nights is because we know so many people have problems with sleep. I mean, anything you run about sleep is always a massive kind of hit with the readers. And you've been doing huge amounts of publicity around this, haven't you?
yeah,
Because so many
yeah,
people are having trouble with sleep.
yeah. And it's often the same sorts of questions that come up all the time, and it's difficult because Jen said something in her introduction. She was talking about sleep research and a lot of the science that we know. And yes, we do know a lot about it. But when I was studying sleep medicine, I had a very tricky conversation with a couple of professors about insomnia, and we were like, oh, this research, that research. But insomnia is caused by hyperarousal. And I'm like, hang on a minute. We're looking at all this focus on insomnia as a diagnosis, as a sort of condition, if you like. But where's all the stuff about hyperarousal? And
Mm.
hyperarousal is basically the nervous system in alert, is nothing to do with sleep.
Yeah. So,
Why is
so,
the
so for
system
those,
up?
so for those people
Mm,
who are listening, who kind of understand, maybe read some Gabor Mate, or that kind of, Bessel von der Kolk, the kind of the body keeps the score, which is all about that sense of we need to be within a kind of normal kind of like okayness, some kind of
mm.
equilibrium, and if we're in a state of kind of trauma, then you can't. Does that mean that in the same way that you can't really kind of take in information if you're in a kind of traumatic state? Is it the same that you can't sleep if you're kind of too whizzed up?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen, trauma or not, no trauma. Basically, a good way to describe it is if I get my trusty bottle of Coke. So imagine your body is like this bottle of fizzy drink, and you get up in the morning, and the day starts to go, and the bottle starts to get shaken, and as the day goes on and stuff's going on, you are shaking it all up, someone hits your car and you shake it up. That's what happened to me yesterday. No, today and yesterday, twice. And so my bottle is really shaken up.
Particularly
So
because it was Heather's husband's brand new car got hit twice by a neighbour and somebody else. Bad.
he
Anyway,
hasn't
so
come
we're
home
shaking the
yet.
bottle. We're
Anyway, we're
really
shaking
stressed
the
about the
bottle, yeah, and
car.
yeah, and so now, so you, I mean, you can see how much pressure is in that. If I open that,
Yeah,
that is going to be absolute carnage. So it's the same analogy to if you're going to bed, it's like you're going to try and put that bottle of fizz down to
yeah,
sleep, and it's full of all that pressure. So this is the nervous system up on hyperarousal. All this stuff is happening, and it's just getting really, really het up. So the question is, how do we let that pressure off so that when by the time we come to bedtime, we're not trying to deal with it in the other fantastic shit show that is, I'm very professional, aren't I? That is the whole sort of thing about sleep hygiene and sleep routines, because if you're dealing with that, there is no routine in an hour that's going to take the pressure off.
no, I'm thinking about all those like lavender pillow sprays and kind of, that's not going to touch the sides,
It's
is it?
yeah, and that's a big part of why I wrote the book, because I just wanted to really get over the fact that there's so much going on. It's almost logical that we don't sleep if we're dealing with insomnia.
Right.
So, and I mean, right now, Ellen and I were saying earlier about how we're living in a world where it's gone a little bit mad, hasn't it? There's
Yeah.
an orange hue emanating across the Atlantic, which is going to affect our nervous system. And when we think about that hyperarousal, not necessarily in a trauma perspective, if we think about it, if anything is putting our system under threat, well, you're not going to go to sleep if you're in danger. You are awake because it's your body is keeping you safe,
Yeah.
which is a really big thing to think about. It's like, okay, I'm feeling like this right here, right now. Actually, is my world on fire? And
Yeah.
coming back to that sort of internal self-checking is like, can I feel my feet on the floor? Can I feel my hands? Can I breathe? Can I just come down and just go, actually, right here, right now, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And if we can do that all the way through the day, just
Yeah.
that internal checking, we can start to pull that pressure down because we can get lost. I mean, it's like our heads become up here somewhere, completely detached from the body. If we bring it back down and just go, just hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Am I
Kind of
okay?
kind of come into the body. My meditation teacher always talks about that as how you can change the world in a breath. So
Mm,
if you take a kind of deep breath in and kind of breathe out calmly, actually you can kind of reset, a lot, and trying to do that kind of remembering to do that kind of during the day and to kind of stop and check in with yourself. My friend
mm.
Hannah talks about checking in with your trust baby, which
That's,
is that
yeah,
kind of which I love. I love it. When I first heard it, I kind of knew exactly what she meant, but I'd never heard that concept before. But it's kind of really checking in with that kind of, the kind of baby bit of yourself and going, how's it going down there? Is it all right? And I tell you what, I sometimes find when I check in with my trust baby, it's quite cross. It's like, you've really been ignoring me.
yeah, yeah. My trust baby is my meerkat.
Oh, I love that.
So if you imagine the system sort of quietly your nervous system is always doing this all the time. It's always scanning. It's doing it in a very sensory way, and I talk a lot in the book about a sensory process. It's always feeling, smelling, sensing.
Come
Uh,
on, you can do some meerkatting on your cameras, everyone, Jen and
And then
I.
the more agitated it gets, it's like, what's going on? So how do we actually soothe our meerkat? How do we bring it down? How do we just go, actually, you know what? We're okay. Because it's doing a really good job of looking out for us. But it's like, oh, come on, it's okay.
Yeah.
But that can be really hard to do for ourselves. I mean, and I think we are very much a generation of women for whom it is particularly difficult
Yeah. Well, I
to
think we're
get
so trained never to kind of
mm,
check in with the kind of our inner kind of,
mm,
a kind of trust baby. And by that, I mean like really kind of coming into the body and thinking how you really are. I think actually we were trained most of the time to try and do as little of that as possible.
mm,
Was kind of the education a lot of us got.
mm.
I
Wasn't it?
Getting
think,
that drive
sorry,
is hard.
I
Mm.
just want to, sorry, I'm just gonna pop in here. I
Yeah.
think, so, I felt I went through a period of very difficult midlife collision, um, era of my own where it was like money and divorce and um, addiction, not my own, but my loved one. And I found that it seemed totally rational that I couldn't sleep a wink
Yeah.
because there was so much that needed to be handled. And I guess I'm really interested in hearing, throughout this chat of how we deal with those things when whatever's going on in your life. And I think there are a lot of midlife women where the totally natural response is to be completely freaking out. And, this dial goes to 11, 110% of the time.
Mm.
Because I mean, I went through probably 2 years where it felt like I wasn't sleeping very much. And that little meerkat me was always like, but what about this? What about this? And it just trying to juggle those things. So I just wanted to kind of pop in, and I think
I think
it's
that's one
nice
of the
to
really
remember.
I think it's one of the really interesting bits about Heather's book is there's a really kind of great chunk on kind of exactly that actually it's a sense it's that you shouldn't be castigating yourself if you're finding it hard to sleep when you're having a really difficult time. And I love the bit where you talk about nightmares and those kind of kind of terrible dreams actually being the kind of the body's way or our kind of emotional way of kind of working through some of the stuff that's happening to us. I thought it was really interesting to read a sleep book, which was actually saying maybe what's happening to your sleep is a reaction to what you're doing in your life.
Yeah. I mean, a psychiatrist once said to me, when he who works with people in residential care, and he said, I'm really pleased when people start having nightmares because it means they're starting to process what's going on. Because the really interesting part about nightmares is that it happens during REM sleep, where the body isn't producing adrenaline. So there are certain functions that can process in the brain without that added kick of the, oh my God, yes, it may still give you the oh my God to wake you up, but that's a response to it. So his view was that nightmares are a sign of inherent health that we are able to process in that way. Now, that's not to say it's easy, and there's lots of things to do to think about how to address that. But again, that comes back to what do we do during the day as to is for some people, there's a really lovely technique called the dream shelf developed by Dr. Justin Havens, and it's all about creating this. And I talk about it in the book. There's a vignette that I've created of it, talking about a story of creating the story how you would like your nightmare to complete. Because quite often a nightmare is something that hasn't completed, then that gets turned into this completely bizarre set of scenarios, which will pull from detail all over the place. But how do you want to complete it? So it may be that the example I use is someone in the book, she's having a nightmare that she's got a stalker. So she becomes this superhero as how she's going to destroy her stalker. And we really work on how to embody that feeling. And the more we build it into the brain, into the memory banks, of course, that's what the nightmare's doing. It's pulling from all the different memory banks. So it pulls that in too, and it starts to get a completion. And
Mm.
it's trying to complete something. So the body is alarmingly rationally dotty. And like insomnia is a very logical, rational, and your body's trying to keep you safe. Nightmares are a very rational, trying to complete these things, but it doesn't feel like that, does it, when you're going through it? It's quite the opposite.
So most of the people who come to see you in your sleep clinic, what's your typical patient? I mean, what are most people presenting with? Or
I
what
would
have you
say I've
been
got
asked
three,
most about
yeah,
doing the
I've
book?
got three typicals.
Yeah,
One is type A perfectionists with very severe insomnia because insomnia's best friend is perfectionism.
right.
So massively high achievers, and that drive that gets you through and gets you to do whatever you're doing is often the thing that will then keep you awake. But insomnia will pick up anything from grief to addiction to um, yeah, but perfectionism I would say is the biggie in that cluster. I probably about 40% of my clients are neurodiverse, because those who are neurodiverse, there are some very specific issues around how sleep works.
Mm.
A lot of people have circadian rhythm disorders, which again is often one of the roots to an insomnia problem or a sleep problem is that you've actually got a clock problem in your body. Your body wants to sleep at a completely different time to the world.
Mm.
And that's very, very specific with neurodiversity. So there's a lot involved in that. And then I would say the third tranche of my work is complex trauma,
Okay.
where I work with the sort of the 20 to 30% of people who for whom pretty much everything hasn't worked. And within that, I might be supporting people to come off medication, or they may have just come out of residential care, all sorts of, but it's a very complex area. So there's three very specific tranches to my work.
So,
Um,
so the ones who were coming along with perfectionism, explain to us a bit about what the mechanism is there. Is it that they're such perfectionists that their brains kind of keep worrying about what they've got wrong or what they need to get right?
I think it can be, it manifests in lots of different ways. A lot of perfectionism comes from childhood. And I think you and I talked a little bit about this on the walk when we were in Wales.
Mm,
The things that are set up for us when we're children and the expectations we're trying to meet. So we're driven to try and meet these things, and yet whose goals are we trying to fulfill?
yeah, yeah.
And we're holding ourselves often unconsciously as well, to a very, very high, unachievable standard. But of course, if we come back to this, that is just shaking the system all the time,
Yeah,
because how do you rest if it's never enough?
yeah. Wow.
And it's a really difficult thing. I mean, how do you rest if you've never felt that you've met the unexpressed expectations of a father figure? And
Yeah.
I mean, that's very common. Um, in that category also, there's a lot of people who go away to school when they're very young, and there's a whole shift on the expectations. So it's all these different expectations that
Mm.
we grow up with that are driving us.
And
Um,
and and so is it that as you drop off to sleep, all your kind of normal defenses kind of go down, and then suddenly those things come back at you?
Yeah. For some people it will work that way. For some people, because I mean, as the day goes by, we're picking up all this information. We never ever stop. We just go, 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 go all the time. It's like we're like magpies just picking it all up. Then bedtime comes and it's like all the stuff of the day comes up, all the random stuff that's sort of sifting around in the background comes up, and everything just kind of the brain is like
Yeah.
everything's coming. For some people, it's that fabulous 3 a.m. waking, and I would bet that if we were to ask in the chat how many people are awake between 3 and 4 a.m., it'll be most of you.
Yeah, how
Because
many put raise a hand or kind of come on the chat if you do 3, 4 a.m. Yeah, here we go. Wake ups. Let's see any other raised hands. Yeah, we'll say yeah, that's a lot. Thumbs up
but
from
there is,
Isabella.
so it's quite a good one to sort of highlight what exactly is happening. So if
Yeah,
we think technically how sleep works, it's a series of 4 to 6 cycles, 90 to 120 minutes long, literally made up of two halves. In the first half of the night, we get the most deep sleep, and in the second half of the night, we get the most REM sleep. And it's almost like there's a changeover point in the middle, and
right.
that is between that 3 and 4 a.m. point. So it's a really normal time for sleep. We actually wake quite a lot through the night, but we don't tend to remember it. But that's the one that we do. The other thing that's also happening is our stress hormone, cortisol, is naturally starting to rise to push us towards wakefulness. So if we're already in hyperarousal, already stressed, by the time that point comes, at that sort of break point, we're now pushing right up out of that point there. So because it's quite normal to wake up and just go back to sleep. Actually, the more older we get, we're more likely to go for a wee, come back,
Mm,
20 minutes, half an hour later, go back to sleep. But for some people, they will wake and it's like boom, straight up into absolute panic
yeah.
because, oh my God, I'm awake. And
And
so
suddenly
it's like,
everything
yeah.
starts whirring again. So Rachel on the chat, she's saying she literally can't sleep past 5 a.m. irrespective of what time she goes to sleep.
And that could well be. So the other thing that's often not talked about, in not so commonly known, we all have a chronotype. We all have a biological timing in our system. It sounds like, Rachel, you could well be a quite a extreme morning person for whom you're not going to sleep, but because that's your biological wake time. And
Interesting.
that is a really big piece that I work on, because the roots of a lot of sleep problems are in the chronotype camp. So when we're teenagers, we are we often have a biological delay, and boys are worse than girls for this, and it can be a couple of hours. So if you think, in every cell in our body we have a clock, and that is genetically determined, whether you're morning type, intermediate, most of us are intermediates, then night owls, and then there's extremes on those. And that really does, your body has its own timing. It's got nothing to do with the clock, it's to do with the light dark cycle, and then a bunch of other things like keeping meal times, exercise, temperature. There's a whole other things, but the light dark cycle, the biggie. But the thing about teenagers, if they're a night out and then they get this biological delay, they're not even sleepy, not even vaguely sleepy, midnight, 1 a.m., but they still need 10 or 11 hours sleep.
Yeah, no, I understand that with my own teenagers. They sometimes they seem to go to bed at like 4 in the morning and sleep all day. It drives me
Yeah,
absolutely nuts.
because they've got that delay. Now, of course, it's a real problem because they've got to get up and go to
Go to
school.
school, yeah.
But there's all that so many people will tell me about lying in bed, and this can go on till your mid-20s. That's what's really shocking about it.
Wow. So
Um,
it's really difficult. But quite a few
yeah.
people on the chat saying that they wake up really early. They wake up at like 5 a.m. and they're not sure whether they should just keep lying there and try and sleep or they should get
I'm
up.
going to explain in a minute, because so there's the others, there's the other side to the chronotype thing. So if we
Okay, so
think
it
about,
might be that your certain chronotype is that you like getting up early in the morning. Well,
you are,
that's
yeah, you
makes
could well be an early type. And this is, I mean, there's this whole thing, trend that, thank you journalists for the 5 a.m. club, where people are sort of raving about, oh yeah, I get up at 5 a.m. and I'm really efficient. If you
some
are an
people are.
early
I'm
bird,
about the worst person in the world at 5 a.m.
me too.
I hate everybody. Everyone thinks I'm like really cheery and love everyone. I don't at 5 a.m.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm married to one, and then it's like, just do not
No,
talk to me
no, no.
until I've had some tea. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, ditto.
Definitely not at 5 a.m. But some people work really well at 5 a.m. They get up and they're absolutely fine. So we've
Yeah.
all got this different timing. But what goes together with the timing, there's two processes to sleep. The second piece is called process S, and that's the build up of sleep pressure. So as the day goes on, we build up this chemical in the brain of adenosine that by the time bedtime comes, with your timing and the sleep pressure, it creates a window and you go to sleep. The great thing, if you do get up at 5, what should happen is your sleep pressure builds and you're sleepy, and you're sleepier, and your body will naturally change your sleep depth to cope for the disrupted night the night before. But of course, a whole bunch of crap gets in the way, stress being the big one. Caffeine is another one. The reason caffeine works is that it effectively blocks adenosine in the brain, so it can't attach to the whatever the things are called, because my brain's completely fried and I don't know what they're called, and that's really funny that I don't know.
And yeah,
It'll
and yeah,
come to me at 3 in the morning.
yeah.
But it's like a car getting in the way of the adenosine trying to park. So
Right.
it blocks it completely.
So adenosine is the sleepy stuff. So you write in
Yeah.
the book about we all need to kind of accumulate what Heather calls kind of like coins of
Sleep pressure,
adenosine
adenosine. Yeah.
over the day. So you need to do things which make you sleepy enough for you to have kind of accumulated enough in your sleep bank to be able to go to
Yeah.
sleep.
And primarily that's getting as much light as possible in the morning, keeping movement, and keeping an eye on stress. They're the biggies, really.
Yeah.
And that morning light is almost the most critical factor in this. And as I said earlier, keeping the stress levels as under control as we can. But it's the sleep timing thing is really interesting, because often people will say, but I remember for years trying to go to bed, and of course, if you aren't sleepy, you aren't going to sleep,
No.
and that's
So what
yeah.
do you do if you're lying in bed, kind of tossing and turning, and you can't sleep? What's your advice? What do you do? Do you lie there, kind of forcing yourself to kind of count sheep, or should you kind of stop trying to go to sleep and do something else? Because
Yeah,
that's something I
do
always
something else.
wrestle with.
So there's nothing worse. You can't lie there and go, I'm going to make myself sleep. That is not happening. And it effectively makes it worse.
Yeah,
If For some people, they can get out of bed and go and do something else. If we go back to these two processes that work together in these sleep windows, there are 4 to 5 windows all the way through the night. Yes, you might wake for a bit, be a bit there, do something else, but then you'll get sleepy again and go back to sleep, and you'll get less sleep. But actually, as I said, your body will take the recovery the next night. The problem is that we start to freak out about it because it's like, oh God, I'm going to be a disaster tomorrow. The world's going to end, and panic sets in.
Yeah.
The truth is, yeah, your day might be a bit crappy, but it's like, okay, now how am I going to look after myself and myself, pace my way through the day so that actually I get through? Now, I'm talking very specifically here. I'll clarify this on having 1 or 2 or 3 nights where this is happening, and it's often 1, 2, and 3. I'm not talking about someone with persistent insomnia here. That's a
Yeah.
different conversation. I wouldn't be quite so glib in that
Mm.
case
So if you're just
because,
having a
yeah,
few nights where you wake up and you can't go back to sleep and you just keep going, you're fine.
yeah,
You'll work it out the next night.
yeah. Yeah, but ironically,
So
the
at
first
what
thing,
point do we begin to panic? When does, like, it being like you've got hot flushes and they're waking you up and whatever, and then you sleep better
first
the next night?
yeah, we don't panic. That's the
Okay, we
big
don't panic.
panic.
We got that, everybody. We don't panic.
Panic. And just while I keep it in my head, sleep windows are different for everyone, and it's different. It's again, it comes back to the timing piece. Um, if if we can't sleep, getting out of bed can be really helpful. There was this huge trend during lockdown with people both making sourdough and making Lego models because people were getting up and going and doing something else. And
Mm,
there is research, there's a whole question about did we used to sleep in a biphasic way in 2 phases? And there is definite data in Victorian times of people having these two sleeps, if you like, and in the middle of the night they go and make babies basically, and do other stuff.
What,
And
so people would go to sleep earlier in the evening and then have a kind of bit of time in the middle of the night when they were awake
yeah,
and then have a, and
yeah,
that was so a bit like a siesta or something, but kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
overnight.
yeah. So it's thinking, it's coming to terms with, right, okay, I'm someone who's waking. What can I do that actually is a bit more enjoyable at that time? Now, I will confess that when it happens to me, I go downstairs and watch TV. Because the TV is the other side of the room. It's not quite the light's not quite so stimulating. I know not to watch something drastic and stimulating because it's more the stimulation that's the problem, not the blue light. Blue light
Okay.
is the thing that everyone's jumped up and down about, but actually we know that
So
it's
so what do you watch, Heather? What's your secret tip for
oh, I got really into Ozark until it got scary. Oh
so
yeah,
something quite gentle, so a bit like Gilmore Girls or kind of,
yeah,
something
yeah. Something
David
Monty
Attenborough.
Don. Yeah, watching Gardener's World. I was watching Gardener's World the other day, because I
Perfect.
knew that I was going to have a crap night because I was getting up really early to do something important. So that means
Oh no, that's always terrible.
I've got it coming
Yeah.
basically. But
You're getting
it's
up to go on like Good Morning Britain or something.
that one. Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Did you sleep well the
that
night
was a
before?
bad night.
Yeah, no, I never sleep well when I know I'm going on breakfast telly. It's always terrible.
Yeah.
Partly because they have to come and
I'm
get you at about 5 a.m.
blushing now because it's like, oh God, I'm still like, oh God, yeah, breakfast TV. Yeah,
That's quite
that
a
was an
thing.
adventure.
Yeah, you
Um,
never sleep well if you're going on breakfast telly, I can promise you that.
yeah. Well, I'll remember that in 2 weeks. I'm going on the Lorraine show on the 28th.
Oh, that's good. She's
So,
nice.
but yes, the she doesn't work on a Friday, and I'm going on a Friday. Anyway, I digress.
Oh, so who do you get instead of Lorraine on a Friday?
Don't know.
Hmm?
Don't know. But the thing is, it's almost coming to terms with waking is normal, and the bit that I'd be working with someone is the response to the waking. So
There's a really sorry, it's a really funny thing on the chat saying this menopausal woman isn't going to be making babies in the middle of the night. I'm with you. I'm with you, Fiona. Don't worry. Ah,
no, but I did. It was funny actually. I think in my second week working at the sleep clinic, a menopausal woman came in and said, she said, "Oh, all that stuff you've taught me about what to do when I wake up at the middle of the night." She said, "I've got the answer." Oh, excellent. She said, masturbation. And she was chuffed to, yeah, she was chuffed to bits. And she said, I've even told my mum. I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay. Had she told her husband, or did she not have one?
No, they were sleeping separately because her sleep was so bad, but he
Oh, okay.
had sleep apnea, which is often a really significant problem. In a clinic, you'd often be treating one person for apnea and one person for insomnia.
Okay.
And in that case, it's very much get people sleeping separately so that you deal with your own sleep and let them deal with theirs. But yeah, the I love Jennifer's comment. But yeah, there is definitely and in the first book actually I do talk about how orgasm is really helpful for sleep. It
Yeah,
is.
oh, the chat's lighting up on this. I often do the second sleep. I read that in some countries, especially on the dark winters, people get up together, eat, have sex, read, then go for their second sleep.
Yeah,
Thanks very much for that.
yeah.
No, I mean, so I suppose also in times when we kind of lived in caves or it was very kind of dark for a long time. I mean, it would have been a long spate when there's no light and all there really is to do is sleep. So I can see how
Mm,
the two sleeps work, even in the tropics.
mm.
You
And but it's I mean there are some people who will sleep in multi-phases. I mean the science is this is also the difficult thing in sleep. There's some things that there is no consensus on. There is absolutely no consensus on sleeping in one continuous piece because we know that's not how it works. And often people will say, "Oh, well, I keep waking up." And it's like, well, we need to look into the quality of what that waking is because there is a degree of normal, but it's working out what your normal sleep is because sleep is so individual.
Okay,
It's
so
really
that is interesting because we're bombarded. I read the not Matthew Wright, is he?
Matthew Walker.
Matthew Walker book, which is all about how we don't sleep enough and the kind of catastrophic things that happen to our brains if they don't all get kind of cleaned out every night. And so I think that we all kind of have taken on board this idea that we need to have, 8 hours completely uninterrupted in bed
Mm.
every night from a certain time to a certain time and all that kind of thing. Is that not really true? Do we not need to be that draconian about it?
Matthew Walker wrote a great book, I think, for those of us who are interested in sleep, but he also scared the living crap out of a lot of
Yeah, no,
people.
that's kind of what I was trying to say. I thought it was a brilliant book. I never really
Yeah.
prioritized sleep before I read it, but I certainly did afterwards.
Yeah. But he has come out publicly and I have quoted him talking about it, that perhaps he was too puritanical when he wrote that book. I mean,
Okay.
he was talking about it on a podcast, and he even chose his gym in California based on the direction of the windows so that he got the right light for his
Mhm.
sleep. Um, Now Matthew Walker, I don't know his personal situation, but he he is he was in that book incredibly tough on things, and we know everyone in my world is like going, oh crikey, please don't, because that is just you cannot get tight and constricted around sleep. It will just take one look at you and go, I'm out of here. Why would sleep want to sleep with someone who's expecting all this stuff out of it? It's like it needs to be something you have a softer relationship with because it has this ebb and flow quality to it. Whereas he was very sort of
Yeah,
puritanical. This
he
is
was
what you
super
need to
dogmatic
do,
about it.
otherwise, yeah.
I want to ask you, someone says put on here, she says I've been wearing my Apple Watch to see what it says about my sleep. Do you recommend that at all for seeing what your sleep data says, or is that another thing which is just like more sleep anxiety?
Yeah, I'm none of the devices are accurate. And where I think devices are useful is when you're looking at stress, heart rate, and recovery. I think the Whoop band's got some really interesting recovery data on it. The Apple Watch and the Aura Ring, they're pretty good, but they're still not accurate. And until they are accurate, then I really ask people to just take a very light touch with those numbers
Yeah.
because there is a condition called orthosomnia. It's when people get really obsessed with the data. And I've heard Rory Stewart talk about it on The Rest is Politics about his sleep score not being 85%. It's like, oh, Jesus. Well, firstly, I'm not surprised. I'd love to have a conversation with you, Rory, about your sleep because
He's
I'm not
probably pretty
surprised your
stressed.
sleep's
Yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
But people get really obsessive about that sleep efficiency score. And then they're worrying about it. And you're worrying about something that isn't accurate.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good. I think that's very helpful to lots of us.
Mm.
I mean, I think that that's true on all those devices. And it's funny, my husband and I have got different ones on our phones. Whenever we go for a walk, the kind of the differential between what he's supposed to have walked and I'm supposed to have walked is massive. So
Mm.
I think it's, and also I think it's really important not to get obsessed by those things. I think they can become kind of, too much for things. Certainly friends I've got who've had eating disorders
Yeah.
don't use them at all because I think it can become really obsessive.
And that feeds back again into the perfectionism element of this. It becomes something, and it's almost like we're externalizing a part of the self to this, and it's the quantified self by the data that we're looking at, rather than, well, actually, how do you feel inside?
Yeah,
What's really happening for you here? It's really it's really not good for us at all to be measuring sleep in this way. The
yeah,
bit that you could argue is, well, there's two things. You could argue it gives you an idea of timing, because one of the things that's really important is consistent timing, especially your wake time.
mm,
There's a whole bunch of reasons that keeping a consistent wake time, everything sort of hangs off that, if you like.
yeah.
But again, I mean, it, if I sit and watch the TV at night, it's going to tell me I'm asleep, and
Yeah,
I know
because
I'm
it
not.
because it when it doesn't know. So someone's saying, do you have hard and fast rules about keeping phones in the bedroom near your head at night,
I
etc.?
have don't have any hard and fast rules. The only one I have when I'm working with someone is the fixed wake time.
Okay, so the only hard and fast rule is keep a specific wait time. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So phones, in your book you say it's fine if you're like listening to a kind of quiet meditation, or don't start checking your emails, or
Yeah,
I've been known to.
they've become so ubiquitous, haven't they? They're almost like Lucy's comfort blanket in Snoopy.
Mm,
But um, I've been in more than a few situations where the anxiety of taking the phone out of the room is creating an even bigger problem.
then yeah,
It may be that we're then having to deal with someone's attachment to their phone. And it's using it with a sort of reasonable way. It could be really, if you cannot leave your room because you're in university halls or your living situation is such that you just want to plug in and listen to a podcast or a yoga nidra or
yeah.
a meditation or something, then use it.
Mm. Yeah,
But
but I think
yeah,
it's a bit of discipline. It's like kind of I've been known to like wake up in the middle of the night to start looking at my emails. That's definitely not a way to get
yeah,
back to sleep.
that's a disaster because then the brain's going, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Not it
exactly.
goes.
Or you start going down to like a terrible like wormhole. Um,
Yeah,
okay, so what do you think about having a daytime nap? Love all these
love
questions.
them.
Keep them coming. She'll. Okay, Heather's all in favour of a
I'm
daytime nap.
very pro napping. Napping is, we know that the scientific benefits to napping are well proven. But there's a whole bunch of things to think about. I'm very pro sort of, if your sleep is okay, sort of keep it down to 20 to 30 minutes, keep it short because you want to only go into the first two stages of sleep. You don't want to drop into deep sleep because if you wake out of deep sleep, you will feel like shit.
You feel terrible.
That's
That's
called
always my
sleep
mistake when
inertia.
I have a sleep. Yeah, yeah,
Horrible. If you're massively sleep deprived, then yeah, really allow yourself a couple of hours to try and get a whole cycle. And for some people, that's really useful, and it's really useful often for parents who've got young children, or what I mean, although I am aware that can be tricky. But anywhere we need to top up, if you're getting sort of 4 or 5 hours in the night, topping up with a nap in the afternoon. I mean, it works as a siesta, doesn't it? They've been doing
mm,
it for years. Where we take a nap out of the equation is if we're working with insomnia and we're working with something called sleep restriction, where I'm cutting your time in bed because I basically want to make you sleepy so that you retrain your brain to get sleepy and go to sleep in this period. So we don't want to spend any of those coins of adenosine that we mentioned earlier in the nap that you're having in the afternoon. But
yeah.
if there's no issue with your sleep, then yeah, close your eyes for 20 minutes to half an hour. Absolutely. Bring it on.
I think what that tends to do is also it just kind of calms you down. And we've been talking a lot about kind of checking in with ourselves and kind of being in your body. And when you drop off to sleep like that, you've got to kind of let everything go, haven't you? And you
Mm.
also go into that kind of ruminative kind of bit before you sleep where you're doing quite a lot of processing. I mean,
Yeah.
I certainly find if I've had a very busy day or I've been late on the TV or something like that, it takes me, or I've been out speaking, it takes me quite a long time to even though
Yeah.
I'm knackered, to kind of unwind enough to be able to go to sleep, that you're still so keyed up.
Yeah. And it's really important. You may get less sleep, but you will probably get better quality sleep than quantity. I'm always more interested in the quality of your sleep rather than the quantity. Because if
Hmm.
we squeeze it into this smaller window, as long as there's nothing else going on, often the architecture, the sleep architecture will change and give you that recovery. It might take a couple of nights, but trying to expect sleep to do it for you after all of that going on is going to backfire. And then you get really frustrated because, oh, I'm knackered, I'm tired, I'm wired, and oh, why isn't this happening?
Yeah.
Well, we need that space to be able to come down, to be able to go to bed.
No, I think that that's really wise. I mean, I certainly learnt that when I had to do almost shift work at the Sunday Times. We'd finish at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and you'd get home and you would have been awake since like 8 o'clock the previous morning. But you're so wired and buzzed that I'd have to come home and watch kind of rubbish telly and like, maybe drink some wine or whatever
Mm.
before I could sleep. There was absolutely no point in trying to go to bed as soon as I got home, however
I have
tired
a,
I was.
I want to just chime in on that. I was actually chatting with Eleanor earlier today. Um, when during a particularly stressful part of my life, I found like I could not sleep, but sometimes, in the middle of the day, I would be going to the kitchen and I would just sit down for a minute and I felt so zoned out, like I could barely move.
Mm.
And I was seeing a therapist then, and she said something that was really helpful to me that I hadn't thought about because I was feeling, in a way, conversely guilty because I wasn't sleeping well, but I was so tired.
Mm.
Said, resting sometimes is as good as sleep. And I
Absolutely.
never thought of it that way. And in some ways, I thought, I'm so tired. I shouldn't sit down and like really let myself relax because then I won't be able to get to sleep later. And it really helped me. I think this idea that resting sometimes could be as good as sleep or was this vital part of maybe the daytime routine. And I never really thought of that. And I think I see a lot of you know, queenagers, people, my friends, people who are part of Noon, and they're in the midst of handling so much. And it feels like we're not giving ourselves time even just to sit down and rest where we're not being productive,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And
So,
there's a lot about that in the book, and it's absolutely critical. Giving ourselves permission to rest is everything because without it, we are going to burn out. It's plain as day. There is that pacing element. You wouldn't run a marathon without thinking about how am I going to pace myself through this 26 miles. And rest makes all the difference. I mean, your brain needs it. We cannot compute all this information that we constantly pull in. We have to give the brain some space to just go, oh, I'm just going to move everything around a bit in there because it will do it on its own.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get on the train after work and everyone's there and they're on the device. It's like,
Just like
you're not,
just
if you
stare out
bump
of the
into me,
window.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's, if you bump into me on the train, I'm likely to be staring out of the window. Because that just needing that time to just dial out. I mean, how often do we get bored now? I mean, we stop and we do something and immediately we pick the phone up or we're always doing.
well,
Is it?
and I think definitely our work,
Yeah,
work contributes to that because this idea that you can use every minute, even if you're going to a business meeting in
yeah,
the cab or on the train, you could be answering emails and whatever instead of gathering your thoughts or
yeah,
thinking.
I'm really interested by this comment in the chat that we're taught that to rest is lazy.
yeah,
And I think kind of, women can be particularly kind of, bad on kind of really harsh on themselves on that.
mm,
And I think that that's something that we have to really, I mean, it's certainly something that as a kind of entrepreneur, I mean, also now because I do quite a lot of speaking in the evenings, I really give myself permission now to say, right, I'm going to have a morning where I sleep in, or I'm going to have a
Mhm.
kind of slow morning, I'm going to go and swim and I'm going to go in for a walk, and I'm not going to do something till after lunch. And I think that allowing ourselves a bit of downtime, a bit of rest. It's lovely. I was talking to Jen this afternoon. We knew we were doing this evening, and Jen was like, "Hey, y'all, I'm just having a little lie down." I thought, yeah, brilliant. That's kind of what we should be doing. So I think giving ourselves, I love the thing, giving ourselves permission to rest, to actually thinking, I really need a bit of processing time. Gosh, I so feel like that. I mean, I remember kind of coming in from work in the old days and just needing to stare at the wall for like half
yeah,
an hour just to kind of come down. And of course, once you've got children, if you have kids and you do a big job, you kind of come in from one and you're immediately, hard at it with the kids. I used to find that the hardest thing because it was when I most wanted to stare at the wall and just kind
Yeah.
of zone out because I was so exhausted, and you'd have to go straight into being a nice kind of carer. And I think that's really hard. I think then
Mm.
actually that the commute then becomes really important where you just get a bit of kind of dead zone time to,
But
hopefully
actually,
not.
there's something really political too about the importance of rest. And I did get in, I have got into it a little bit in the book. There's a really fabulous book by Tricia Hershey called Rest is Resistance,
Well,
and how we have a society that's really based on Calvinistic principles of just go, go, do all the rest of it all the time. And biologically, that is not how our circadian rhythm works. So going back to what I was saying about the chronotype and the clocks in our body, that is our circadian rhythm. And it has this ebb and flow of energy. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. And yet we live in a world where we've just got to push through all the time. And it is absolute bullshit.
yeah.
If you really want me on my soapbox, that's the one I'll go for because it is absolutely crap. That is not how we work biologically, and yet we're all push, 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 trying to do this. And it's like, well, of course we can't sleep. How the hell do we think we're going to sleep if we've tried to do all of it? We're just not built that way. We are built to do this. We're not built to do this.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, Heather. I think that's really profound, and that for all of us, and I think particularly at midlife, and I know so many people at Noon who've really pushed themselves hard. We were all lots of us have jumped through lots of hoops, and we've worked really hard, and we're looking after lots of other people, and we're working, and all that kind of thing. And I think that really allowing oneself to take some troughs, take some downtime, kind of, and take it when you can, and don't feel bad about it because I also I've really seen it. It feels really personal to me because I saw my stepmother die in her very early 70s and from a brain tumor, and my aunt, who I really loved, who had a stroke also in her early 70s. Both of whom had worked phenomenally hard, being kind of first women to do da 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 da, and had kids, and they never stopped. And both of them used to boast about how they could get by on hardly any sleep. And I'm convinced that their early demise was they just kind of burned through stuff at too fast a rate and never stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are Thatcher's children, aren't we? We
Yeah.
are that generation who was brought up to think we could have it all, do it all, be it all, and
On 4 hours a
biologically,
night sleep, and it was always sleep that
yeah,
took the
that's
pain.
the
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, that's the thing that we cut, because it's easy to cut it, but actually we are so much more effective when we rest.
yeah.
I mean, the science is crystal clear. It's not even shades of grey, it's crystal clear that we are better when we rest. Our brains need us to rest,
And
and we
yet
are
there's such a
biologically that.
such a puritanical work culture, which is, that exactly as someone pointed out on the chat, I think it was Fiona, that rest is lazy. We need to really train ourselves out of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with Rebecca, but yeah.
Rebecca, sorry, Rebecca.
I know we're getting kind of slightly to the end. We have a few more minutes, but it would be great, Heather, to hear from you some of the things. I mean, there've been tidbits throughout that we can take away. Besides buying your brilliant book, I've just put the link in the chat.
How to be
Um,
awake.
How to be awake. Yeah, full name, How to be awake so you can sleep through the night.
You need a banner. You need a banner,
yeah, I was
Heather, like
admiring
mine.
yours. Yeah.
And sleep masks.
Yeah, yeah.
That say the name on it. But
Noon sleep mask.
and it'd be great, Heather, to hear from you. And also it'd be great to hear from everyone who's here of just, is there anything you're taking away from this you feel like you can implement? Or anything that was particularly helpful in terms of your sleep or what you'd like to change about your sleep. I'd be interested in
Or
hearing.
if that, yeah, or if something hasn't been covered, then yeah, do drop that in as well because there's all sorts of other things that could mean restless leg syndrome is very common in women of a certain age.
What causes that?
Hmm?
I have that. What causes it?
Well, they're not completely clear as to what it is. There's a belief that it's to do with the ferritin content, the iron in a particular in the particular regions of the brain, but it's not completely clear as to why it's happening. But it does come under sleep disorders. It's made worse by stress, alcohol, caffeine, all the normal.
All the good stuff. Yeah, which
Yeah.
leads us very neatly into alcohol and sleep as an interesting topic, says Rebecca. Rebecca, you're getting gold stars today. Great questions.
Mm.
Um, so booze.
Yeah, well, it's not very good for sleep, I'm afraid. It does act like a sedative and can knock you out. Some people don't get that effect, but most people it's a sedative, but it takes an absolute wrecking ball to sleep in the second half of the night. It fragments it so you'll get lighter sleep and your REM sleep, your dream sleep will be a bit mad. And there's a bunch of stuff going on that it's just not helpful.
Yeah.
Um, it's a difficult one because alcohol is so commonly used as a way to wind down. And I'm not someone who wants to go, oh, you mustn't have alcohol, you mustn't have caffeine, you mustn't. But we do know that it does cause a problem. So it's almost thinking about, okay, if I do this, there's going to be consequences. Am I okay with that and not doing it every day, if you like? I mean, one of the things I will often get involved with when I go through people's one of the first questions I'll ask is take me through your 24 hours and then across the whole week. And we look at someone's alcohol use and it's like, right, okay, what's going on there that we need to use that much alcohol every day? What's the need there? So if we go off down a different alleyway, then it's not necessarily we're not dealing with a sleep issue there, we're dealing with something else. So
Mm,
it's not about saying, right, just stop. We've got to think if that's a big part of your life, how are we going to dial you back? How are we going to step back from it? Because we do know technically it does trash sleep, unfortunately.
yeah. Okay. That's a warning. I can see we're nearly at the end of the hour. So, I mean, for me, Jennifer, talk about what have I really taken away from this? I've actually been writing quite a few notes. I can't really think unless I've got a pen in my hand. And I also think I might write about this in the newsletter this week, Heather, because I think that bit about giving ourselves permission to rest. I think that goes so to the heart of so many of the things that we talk about at noon about, how often do you put yourself first on your to-do list? That somebody was talking to me about paying yourself before you kind of pay others, because otherwise, or doing the thing that you need to do for yourself first in the morning rather than always prioritizing everything else. And I think that the sleep stuff often comes in that bracket, and that we're all pushing ourselves kind of so hard and being so tyrannical that it's the lack of that, the kind of the inner check-in, whether you call it checking with the trust baby or the meerkat, it's kind of lowering our general state of rawness to enough to be more in touch with ourselves, which I think then means we can sleep better. And I
Mm.
have to say, I think the meditating is one of the key things for me, and
Yeah.
exercise, and cold water. If you've done that, then you sleep a lot better.
Yeah, see, as you well know, I cannot stand cold water. Um, I am careful as to who meditation is a very individual thing. For some people, it's really helpful. For
Yeah.
some people, don't even go there. Because if you've got a lot of trauma or PTSD, the
Yeah.
last thing you're going to do is sit in it.
For sure.
Uh,
No, and I really understand that. I know it's not for everyone, but I think
yeah.
if you're somebody who's got a very kind of racing mind, then
Yeah,
forcing yourself to be kind of still and in that more calm space is,
yeah.
I think, really important.
But it's also making the meditation is very much about you're not necessarily going to clear your mind. It's learning to be with the mind. Andy Puddlecombe, who set up Headspace, calls it watching the traffic rather than being the traffic, which I often think is a really lovely way of
Yeah,
thinking about it.
yeah. For me, it's about being in the space between things.
Mm.
That's how I like to think about it. It's kind of, um,
Well, Heather, Eleanor, thank y'all so much. It's been like it's funny. It's like this has been both a restful, informative, but busy talk in like the best way. I feel like I've learned so much, and thank you everyone for contributing and sharing your questions and your experiences. We will be sending this out to everybody who signed up for it, and it will be going behind the membership wall on the site. We'll endeavor to crop it so people, any attendees aren't visible, and won't be sharing the particular questions just for privacy concerns. Of course, get the book. The link is in How to Be Awake. The link is in the chat. We'll include that in an email to everybody afterwards. And yes, Heather, if people want to get in touch with you directly, how should they do that?
I am on Instagram, I am on LinkedIn, and I do have a website. My website's heatherdarwallsmith.com. So you will find me. And please do feel free to drop me a note or connect with me, because I'm always happy to answer questions or point you in a direction or something. And and I've got various things coming up. So you may, if you're interested in sleep and ADHD, for example, I'm doing a really big talk in a couple of weeks on the Seed Talks platform. So there's always stuff going on. I'm always yakking on about something to do with sleep somewhere.
And
so
maybe
if you come to a noon thing, you're quite likely to meet Heather as well. Come to
exactly. I was just going to say, Heather, I met Heather at our Wales trip last year, our Wales retreat. And so, yeah, it's kind of talent and expert that you can find at noon all the time. Do get in touch with Heather, do buy her book. Thank you all so much for coming. And if you have follow-up questions, drop us a line at hello@noon.org.uk, and we'll endeavor to respond to that as well.
Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks so much, Heather. And thanks, Jen, for doing a great chairing job.
Thank you all.
And thanks everyone for joining. Have a great sleep. Rest.
Have a very restful night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.